I'd like to welcome you as well, and also those that are watching online. This reading is taken from Whispers from Eternity from Yogananda with prayer demands. O beacon of cosmic light, send thy guiding ray of divine understanding into the darkness of our ignorance, that our soaring consciousness may land safely, incarnation after incarnation, on terrain conducive to continued thoughts of thee. O flower of fragrance, send the scent of love to inspire us always in our search for thee, with longing to climb ever higher into the stratosphere of divine realization. May dreams of thy perfect garden, far above all space and time, but near to us always in our hearts, speed our soul's journey and quench our thirst in thee. So this reading from the Bible is a very, very poignant story, isn't it? I mean, here we have Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing what will befall him in the next day, that he will be crucified. And, or not, maybe not the next day, but whatever the timing is. And he has this complete surrender as we read, as Parvati read to us. Without any hesitation, that sense of, I am one with thee, my Father. And yet, he comes to his disciples, and these are his closest disciples. Not someone just walked off the street and is there, but the deepest of his disciples, the closest of his disciples. And they fall asleep on their watch. And Jesus, with comfort, says these amazing words that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, and asks them again to keep watch, to pray during this time. And again, their eyes are heavy and they fall asleep. Well, we've all done that many times, in many lifetimes. We have played that part. And the point isn't so much that they didn't succeed in their vigil. We didn't succeed in our vigil in past times. The point is, where is that surrender happening in the moment? It's almost as if that story, on another approach to it, is giving us great hope. And the hope is that we always have that opportunity to move towards our oneness in the divine. That surrender can always be there. But that surrender, well, that word is not an easy word in our modern culture and vocabulary to really understand. Almost invariably, most people understand surrender as being a concession, conceding, I've lost the battle, I'm surrendering. But of course, that isn't at all what this reading is about. It's really saying surrender has to be the fullness of our hearts in tuning into the divine. You know, in the yoga postures, there's one of the asanas, one of the yoga postures in Ananda Yoga for higher awareness. It's called Supta Vajrasana, the supine firm pose. And I'm not mentioning the pose for the pose itself, but for the affirmation that Swami Kriyananda suggests for it. It's a very interesting affirmation. Energetic movement or unmoving peace, the choice is mine alone, the choice is mine. In reality, we need to make both choices. Energetic movement has to be a lifeline of feeling the prana, the gift of God, in our daily active life every day. And the balance of that is choosing unmoving peace as the complement to energetic movement. Both of them require our surrender. That isn't how many people look at it. They see it as, I'm going to do my thing. I need to do this. I was reading this article, I mentioned this last week or 2 weeks ago in Sunday service in Ananda, Palo Alto, that a quite well-known professional football star, who's now one of the TV commentators that does the games, he's had a rough time lately in his life, and he's been through his second divorce. And someone was, I think, counseling him or advising him to, just find your own sense within. And he said, very interesting, he said, contentment is simply a bad word for me. It's not how I operate my life. Isn't that true for a lot of people, though? Why? Because they assume that contentment is more like being satisfied, having a satisfactory life. And it's not the same. I mean, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it is one of the niyamas. And the emphasis is that the commentary is that contentment is the prince of virtues. So it's not just some lackadaisical neutral space, but a dynamic experience of opening up. And that contentment is what allows us to surrender in every situation. And it's something that we can look at in terms of what the Bhagavad Gita reading gives to us. Now, I don't think I've ever brought notes to give Sunday service before. So I did this so I wouldn't go for 2 hours. Because who's ever doing lunch today over Expanding Light won't appreciate that. But, so I'll only go for an hour and a half. But if you just recall a moment ago, Parvati read this quote from the Bhagavad Gita, and it's extensive in terms of all those qualities. There's not just a few, there's a lot of them. And what this allows us to do is individually, personally, to tune into or figure out and then tune into, what can I really be more dynamic with in my life? Because just like in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, when he lists out Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga, and he lists the first 2 being the yamas and niyamas, they're qualities that we're working with. They're not so much things that are emphasized for us to do. They're really just a description of the conditions as we grow spiritually. And then, because we know that, we can utilize those qualities and say, if I emphasize this in my life, I can grow towards that attainment. And so these qualities, they're called attainments in one way, but they're qualities that the Gita provides for us in the same way. They're a description of what happens when we unfold, when we uncover who we really are. These are the experiences, these are the qualities, this is the consciousness that we have, which is the truth of who we really are, that maybe has been hidden by our ego, our karma, all these different things. But there are also things that in this time in our lives, we can explore by surrendering to them. Again, the word surrender isn't just a passive, okay, you got me, God, I'm going to just do this for you. It's more in the sense, I am going to, with self-offering, be dynamic in this experience with you, God. And so, just to highlight a number of these points here, that it begins with having humbleness. Now, the word is humbleness rather than humility, which is kind of an interesting refinement there. Humbleness is not self-deprecation. It's not being a doormat for others and just letting them walk over ourselves. It is really that dynamic, positive, constructive focus that is trying to dissolve the ego's control of us and the manipulation of the ego saying, no, you should get what you need for yourself. Don't worry so much about others. Well, we can look at the world around us and realize that ploy doesn't really work that well. It's good at messing us up, for the most part, and it messes us up not only with God, with one another. We start to engage in the differences. And humbleness is simply that engagement where we're saying, rather than coming from my ego, I'm going to offer myself more dynamic awareness into an expanded consciousness. And so humbleness allows us to be real in that, but dynamic in that. You know, another yoga posture, this isn't a promotion for Ananda Yoga, but the Swami Kriyananda described this, and I've heard others describe this, that the most difficult yoga posture to perfect is savasana, the corpse pose, in deep relaxation. Now you'd think, wow, at the end of all my postures, I get to lie down and just relax. But it isn't really savasana unless it's dynamic. Because what can easily happen, remember, what do you usually do when you're lying on your back with your eyes closed? You know, of course we're going to sleep. And so you have this tremendous momentum of doing that at the end of these stretches, yoga postures, these asanas, to just, in a sense, let go. But several things will happen in that way. That one, you'll become subconscious. And you may drift on into pleasant dreams, daydreams. Or you may fall into sleep. I mean, many, many times over the years I've taught yoga postures classes, and you probably, if you've taught them or been to some, or you've been the one doing this, is that suddenly you hear this gentle Now, they could be doing Hong Sau with a variation. But the reality is, I read this many years ago in studies on yoga, that the moment you step into the subconscious or sleep mode during relaxation, you actually diminish the quality of your relaxation. Now, we know that sleep is a refreshing part of our lives, but it's not that refreshing compared to dynamic, focus, deep relaxation. And so, when you think about surrender, is the surrender just letting go into the subconscious? It isn't. It's a dynamic self-offering to open up and expand. And so we can use this with all these qualities or attributes that are listed here. That patience, honor. Honor is an interesting one. It's actually something that, for those of us that were at the wedding the other afternoon, Friday, with Dharna and Prita from Ananda, Los Angeles, the wedding vow talks about this honor, that we're honoring one another. And in a relationship like that, it's honoring the soul nature as it expressed through that person that's being honored. So it's honoring the divine, but also letting it be touched upon in a human situation. And so that honor is what allows love, for instance, to be nurtured and to be expanded. Love itself, although it's a purity coming from the divine, can so readily be caught by an expression just from the human side of things. Of, I love you, you better say I love you back to me. Where love itself, as we honor it and in a relationship, it's just that sense of letting love come through us to embrace and touch others in that way. Surrender is very potent when we include honor and we have patience with that. Patience with ourselves, patience with others. It's letting go of, I need to do this from my ego, or you need to do that because I want you to do it. And so it's that release into letting go. And then forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of these things that we can see like surrender, that can have a shallow or a negative connotation to it, that it isn't resonating with what's really being asked of us. Forgiveness is that power that allows us to feel we're not laying conditions, again, either on ourselves or other people. There's a freedom in that. In surrender lies victory. And then steadfastness and self-control, that ongoing rhythm of just being steady in our lives. Just think when, you have a busy day and you realize, I haven't meditated this evening or this afternoon. Steadfastness just says, meditate. Not, can I meditate or will I meditate? Steadfastness just is that energy that says, I will meditate. It may not be a deep or long meditation, but I'm going to meditate. That steady, even flow is much greater of an impact than our conscious mind coming from the ego, controlling it at most times, doesn't recognize. It just feels, it's fine to miss a meditation. I've done many. Matter of fact, I did every day last week. How about that? But we should be saying, the past is the past. Where am I now? What choice am I making to be steadfast? And the self-control is really just saying, the soul qualities are what I'm approaching always. That's where I'm offering my energy. That's what my engagement is to control not out of just manipulation of who we are, but the control that allows us to say, why am I here? Where am I going? What can I offer in going forward? And then this interesting one, there's several interesting ones that probably cause a little bit of consternation or reaction from a lot of us. Indifference to sense delights. Now, we can all agree that that's a good thing. It just has to do with the reality of when it happens. Do we engage in letting go? And so, the way that we can do that is not leap to, I'm not going to have this treat or whatever. I've traveled with Sagar, Nayaswami Sagar, a few times, and he just has this very magnetic presence that draws ice cream to him. And amazingly so, that people won't even know about that he enjoys that, and they will say, why don't we go for ice cream? And the point isn't that we eat ice cream or not. That's not really significant. It's whether we indulge in that experience. Whether we can remain centered in the experience of still feeling the divine touch. And as we walk those steps, maybe in small increments in the right direction, it is as if we lose the experience of enjoying that sense delight. We're simply not caught by it. If it comes, it comes. If it doesn't come, it doesn't come. It's not what our operating notion of life is revolving around. If it happens, it happens. Now this other one is takes some understanding, and I'll say the version of it that is probably a kinder way of understanding it. Detachment from outer concerns. And it's what probably read in the rays of the one light is slightly more imposing. But it's where we're letting go of family, of home, possessions. And it actually specifically says to let go of family in terms of a spouse, children, all of that. Well, you look at Ananda, whether here at the village or any expression of Ananda, or people that are just living on their own connected with Ananda. Most of us are householders. It's not saying to let go of being a householder. It's saying to detach from those concerns as being your reality. They're a way of us exploring, whether it's friendship or in a marriage or children or with parents or just friends, it's our opportunity to really say, as Sister Gyanamata said in the book of hers, is titled, God Alone. But for our karma, who we are, that doesn't mean we become numb to the experience of life around us, but rather our orientation moves always towards that God enlivens all of that. And if we can feel ourselves engaged in that way, then God will be there at deeper and deeper levels. We will have that experience in whatever happens. And this is the only way that our worldly outer concerns can really be what they're designed for. They're designed in a way, interesting enough, to bring us into Maya, into delusion, into duality. But because of that, we can shift the focus and move us through those tests as springboards to finding God's presence even more so. For many years, I've done a lot of traveling for Ananda, with Ananda. And for a while, decades ago, I used to help out Crystal Clarity publishers. I see Ram here sitting in front. He and I both have spent a lot of time on the road selling Crystal Clarity products. And at various times, it wasn't like there was a real budget to have salespeople on the road. So I remember staying in a lot of $30 motel rooms that were questionable as to whether I should be in them. But I realized this interesting thing, because it's like I'm saying about these tests and challenges of life, that they were so peculiarly odd in terms of the vibration that it made me even put more focus into meditations in them. I always brought an altar, but it was like it increased my ability to be open to God and Guru because of the circumstances. They just weren't that supportive. Now, I wouldn't recommend that you live your life that way, that you're putting yourself out to test. Believe me, your tests will come, so don't have to hunt them down. But it was interesting to observe in myself that under these circumstances, I was able to utilize and grow from that experience rather than being underwater from them with potential negativity and negative karma. And so we always have that choice under circumstances that we have, but to have our relationships more in the light of what we're offering in them. So to pray for a spouse, to pray for our children, to pray for our friends, to really feel that it is through that connectedness that we're engaged in their highest good. And it feeds back to us to be in our highest good. And so we're having this feedback mechanism that's always expansive and opening and supportive, rather than protective, restrictive, and contractive. But that's the self-surrender, that's the self-offering, that we're inclusive, but we're tuning in always to our soul reality to be in that expansion. And then it says to have an ever tranquil heart. And it adds this sub-part to it. That ever tranquil heart, whether it be in fortune or misfortune. And the difficult one for most of us as devotees is not in the misfortune. It's having the ever tranquil heart in the fortune. When things are a blessing for us, we can get caught in just in that subtlety behind the obvious. Feel that, oh, this is great. This is really a blessing. And we should acknowledge that. But we shouldn't have an emotional charge saying, wow, this is really great. More in the sense of, thank you, God. This is a blessing. And being tranquil, even-minded and cheerful in your heart, so that we feel as much as we recognize, we feel that experience as our own. And then it says, unswerving devotion to God alone. Unswerving. It means we're not getting off track. But we do get off track. We swerve. And so the point is, where are we moving? In that direct focus, we're moving ahead. And in that way, more and more, we are unswerving. We feel that. You know, it's like with prayer. Prayer is really the feeling of the heart expressed in the way that's meaningful to you to feel the touch of God. And sometimes that prayer will be moved into words. At other times, the prayer just might be the feeling of your heart, without the words, just that connection of unswerving devotion to God, and to feel that deeper and deeper. But for us, it's to pay attention, to be aware of what's happening, not to assume that this is what it is, this is what it has to be. But from inside, let that unswerving devotion find its expression and its integration for you personally. And then this interesting one close to the end of this list, that as we grow spiritually, as we surrender, as we do self-offering, we increase the love of solitude. And here we are in a community. But that's the richness of what life before us is to find always center everywhere, circumference nowhere, and to live in community, to enjoy the blessings of the satsang, that fellowship with other truth seekers, always in our lives, but always coming from the price of greatness is solitude, is seclusion. And take the time, whether it be a half hour every week, or maybe it's an hour a week, maybe it's longer. Maybe the recommendation that Swami Kriyananda gave all of us, part of Ananda, is to try to spend at least a week every year in that deep inner seclusion, where you're not connecting with the world around you. You're connecting with the world of God. Solely that, completely that, complete self-offering, complete surrender. And then it ends with that focus of that surrender, one has the concentration on the true self, the inner self. That there's no hesitation, there's no mitigating circumstances that ever changes that. It's always that concentration on our true self, on the inner self. So feel the enlivening effect of these encouragements for each one of us to take what we can forward, the steps that will invigorate this experience, and always know that in self-offering, in surrender, we become more and more one with that divine consciousness. Blessings to you.
Lift your hearts up to